Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Pewaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Here's one of our favorite conversations about the people, places, and organizations that shape Milwaukee.
For weeks, Minnesota has been targeted by an aggressive immigration enforcement campaign. Federal immigration agents have surged through the Twin Cities, going door to door, arresting immigrants and U.S. citizens alike. One woman, Renee Nicole Good, was killed by an ICE agent. So how do you report on something like this? Katelyn Vue is an immigration reporter at the Sahan Journal, an outlet in the Twin Cities that covers immigrant communities. She spoke with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez last week. During their interview, you'll hear clips from news reports about what's happening in Minneapolis and Saint Paul.
I wanted to ask you about Sahan because Sahan Journal, where you work, founded, 6 years ago or so, 2019. It's to cover immigrant communities, diverse communities within the Twin Cities. And you are the newsroom's immigration reporter with a direct line to communities of color and immigrant communities. What are you hearing from people in the Twin Cities?
I've been hearing from a lot of folks, mostly fear from immigrants right now, folks who aren't going to work, folks who are staying home. That's causing a lot of problems, I think, with a lot of businesses. Employees aren't showing up, and these families that have children and they are afraid to go to school. And so that's been a lot of what I've been hearing, but I've also been hearing from folks, mostly U.S. citizens, talk about how the organizing that they were so committed to when the murder of George Floyd happened in Minneapolis, they're revamping those efforts again to organize.
Tell us you are going to allow federal tyranny. That's right. We're talking about murder.
So there's been a lot of fear, but there's also been a lot of neighbors coming together to try to hold strong to help support folks that are at risk.
There have been so many stories, too, that have also been coming out that the nation has been following from the Twin Cities. Obviously, Renee Nicole Good and the use of chemical irritants on high school students. I think recently, though, what people have been following is this story of Chung Lee Scott Tao, a U.S. citizen, grandfather, no arrest record,
was led outside in his underwear and a blanket in freezing conditions.
You talked with Tao and his family, and I'm curious about what about his story and arrest stood out to you after getting to know him and sit down with them?
When I spoke with him, it was literally the day after that he was arrested, so he was still processing. But I remember one thing he said that kind of stuck with me was that he wanted everyone to know what happened to him. I mean, I feel like anyone would feel embarrassed being shown on social media half naked, but Chung Lee was telling me about how he wanted everyone to know what federal agents did to him because he wanted others to know what they try to protect themselves and learn about their rights. And he wanted that to be the main message.
It's these moments where I think people really appreciate what it means to have independent outlets like Sahan that are covering the community, that have these deep ties and connections to community. And there are also these kind of informal networks of information sharing that have been popping up all over the place. One story that I really couldn't get enough of that showed this off was the Mamas of Cedar story, and this kind of rapid response network that just organically popped up between these mothers. Can you tell us about them and the work that they're doing in community?
Yeah, well, Binta, she's a reporter that works with us. She wrote that story, and she did a really good job. I think she went a lot. She got to know them, and Cedar Riverside is a dense immigrant population. It's really well known that a lot of Somali folks live there who are right now being focused by the Trump administration and targeted by the Trump administration. But Binta was able to write about why they were motivated to take it upon themselves to keep their neighbors safe. And There's a lot of organizations that are here that do really good work, but I think this moment seems to be a moment where I feel a lot of people are feeling like called to act to protect each other. So I think that's a really good example of something like that.
And on the other side of this, you have the federal government threatening the invocation of the Insurrection Act. There's active U.S. military and their troops standing by for deployment into your state. What are you expecting, if you even can know what to expect from the federal government and ICE?
Yeah, well, I listened to CBP, Customs Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino talk at a press conference in Minneapolis. And he emphasized that they're going to continue to arrest as many people as they can.
We're going to continue to be out in the community, and we're going to continue to conduct that mission, that legal, lawful Title VIII mission. And, again, I've been out with my Border Patrol agents. Marcos is out constantly with his troops. And what I see out there is a very professional, prudent, and thoughtful.
There doesn't seem to be any stopping anytime soon. And a lot of the focus right now is just to walk in front of people in the street and ask them about their citizenship. And that's been happening all over Minnesota. There's not a sense of when it'll slow down or how worse things can get. I think everyone sort of has felt devastated after the shooting that killed Renee. And I think everyone is still thinking about what this moment means for us in Minnesota. But I think that there's been a lot of pressure on our elected officials to help ICE make these arrests. And our elected officials are still headstrong about their values of helping Minnesotans win deal through, this massive force on Minnesota. But I used to think I knew where things were heading in Minnesota, but I'm just now trying to expect anything at this point.
I have to ask, as a newsroom, how do you plan for what's coming next? Obviously, a lot of your reporting has, in the past month and a half, shifted to kind of this like rapid response reporting as well. Still getting out stories that really uplift and shine a light on immigrant communities, but also just the basic day-to-days of ICE actions and how it's affecting folks like Chung Lee or other community members. So I guess, how is the newsroom thinking about what comes next?
I think you said it, like rapid response is how it's felt the past, I don't know, few months. It's all hands on deck. Like, I feel like everyone at Sahan has touched the coverage of immigration. It's not just me, there's Andrew Hazard, who's been covering immigration at Sahan as well. Joey Peters, Katrina Pross. We're all just sort of activated now to, we have our separate kind of beats, our own areas of coverage, but immigration enforcement is affecting every industry right now, and everyone. I feel like everyone is seeing it happen to their neighborhood, where there's better agents there. So that's been kind of how it's felt. It's like everyone who is part of Sahan is paying attention to what's happening and not waiting to jump on top of doing a story. So carrying that with me in this rapid response time, I guess, it feels like Sahan is really, prepared in this moment to try to help people tell their own version of what's going on.
I think a lot of people in the Midwest also have fear too that they could be next. There have been a lot of conversations in Milwaukee with leaders, immigrant rights organizations, also like journalists and media outlets of, okay, how do we cover this? And for someone who's in the middle of this right now, do you have any advice for people in places like Milwaukee or other Midwest cities? And to go along with that, how do people support organizations like Sahan or other folks organizing across the Twin Cities if they'd want to do that?
Well, I think, I guess going back to the story I wrote about Chung Lee, he didn't expect what happened to him to happen, but it happened. And piece of advice that I would have is to think about what to do in a situation where federal agents are going door to door, knocking, and understanding what your rights are in that moment. You have your First Amendment, your Fourth Amendment rights, and you have the right to record so that everyone can be able to actually see what happened.
Stop kneeing him in the face! That's his face! Stop it!
Back up or you'll be arrested for impeding. Back up.
I'd say that to support Sahan, it helps us to be able to tell stories that reflect how immigrants' experiences are like right now. I guess it's always been a big, value of Sahan, where we don't just cover about what's happening, but we cover who it's happening to. That's something I take away with me in every story, is that we're looking for who's impacted, who's a face that can show the real effect of a nationwide policy or headline.
That was Sahan Journal immigration reporter Katelyn Vue, speaking with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez.
Lake Effect is a daily talk show on WUWM, Milwaukee's local NPR station. It's a show where we share the stories about the people, places, and organizations that shape the city. If you enjoyed this episode of Lake Effect Spotlight, subscribe to the podcast. You can find all of Lake Effect's conversations at WUWM.com/Lake Effect, and we're on the radio Monday through Friday at noon on 89.7.